A little bit different this morning. I'm going to, if you will, let our guest today introduce himself in whatever free-thinking fashion he would like to, because he's representing the Free Thinkers organization in Colorado Springs. And feel free to let him know who you are so he knows what approach to take depending on his impression of you and your name. He talked to our Sutroma group that I belong to a couple of weeks ago, and didn't get an opportunity to actually deliver the form presentation he thought of. Very articulately done for the 3 minutes I allowed him before they were bombarding him with questions. And I assured him that this is a very sedate, quiet group that
no question. Speak for yourself.
So, anyway, from the Free Thinkers. Ta-da!
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael. I'm the Vice President of the Free Thinkers of Colorado Springs. And like he said, I did have an entire thing prepared, an outline prepared for his Sertoma group, but they had a lot of questions, but that's okay. Because the reason why I go out to groups to speak is to answer what questions you have about us. And I basically just tried to guess what it is that you don't know about us for my outline. So if you have to stop me to ask any question, that's okay. We can go off on any tangent, and this can become your outline. Little history about the Free Thinkers of Colorado Springs. This is our 20th anniversary this month, and the Free Thinkers were formed as a response to Amendment 2 originally. And Amendment 2 was it was a Colorado law basically that was going to ban gay marriage. But free thinking has an older history than that. It was actually born out of the Unitarian Universalist Church, where they were fighting against religious suppression from other groups that didn't really like the way that they were worshiping. You know, when I say Unitarian Universalist, the Unitarian part means they don't believe in the Trinity. You know, they're Unitarians. And that was a very big thing for them to be able to worship in the way that they chose. And all sorts of little laws started popping up in cities all across America where the majority dominant religions would, you know, try to discriminate against them. And so free thought was born there, but also the universalism part means that with the UU Church, you know, they accept deists, atheists, agnostics, Hindus, Buddhists, everything. All faiths are welcome in that church. So while today you might think of Free Thinkers as being primarily an atheist organization because they're fighting against the religious groups that want to have their way, it isn't so. Our membership in the Springs is about half atheists that I can tell, and a bunch of Unitarians that go to service every Sunday, and a few ones and twos from other faiths. In our recent history, you could have seen myself and Gary and Becky speaking before City Council, talking about how if they let the YMCA take over the city pools, then people are going to have to sign a membership to the YMCA. And part of that is declaring that you agree with all of the things that the YMCA stands for. The YMCA is the Young Men's Christian Association, you know, and having to sign a statement of faith basically is something that a lot of people might have a problem with. So we made sure that they considered that before they allowed the YMCA to take over the management of city pools. But anytime something like that comes up, our group tends to think about it, and sometimes we act, sometimes we don't. recently there was a thing called Pulpit Freedom Sunday, happened all over the country, where in order to get more freedom in the pulpit, preachers were filming themselves endorsing a candidate in particular. Most of them Mitt Romney, but some of them even President Obama, because they wanted to take their tax status, their tax-free status, and have even more with it than the restrictions that they have right now. And while some of us might have actually believed that they actually should have that freedom of speech, and so should a 501(c) like the Freethinkers, we should be able to declare who we want people to vote for as well. We didn't actually get to the point where we did anything because these preachers were filming themselves and turning the tape into the IRS. If they weren't, that might have been something that we would have done. We might have sat in the churches and took notes, but these are people that are turning themselves into the authorities to push the issue further. And we're very interested in what the outcome might be, you know, and we're interested if the IRS will do anything at all.
You're talking about the tax-free status
Yes.
of churches,
Yes.
and they were filming themselves
And
Yes.
turning
and
themselves.
turning themselves into the IRS?
Yes, in order to force the court case, because no one can challenge this law unless they have standing if they're going to go through the judicial route.
What's the law they're challenging?
Yeah, yeah.
Certain nonprofit organizations, including churches, are not allowed to declare which candidate they want people to vote for, even though they can say things like every position that they would want in the ideal candidate. You know, they're not allowed to declare outright who they are endorsing.
Support.
And these ministers want to be able to have the right to go out in public and do this.
Yes.
Oh, I
And
see.
they consider this an infringement of their
Oh, I
free
see.
speech.
Okay,
And
so they want to get a court case.
So they want,
Yes.
they want the cake and eat it too, don't they?
yes.
Okay.
And I
Thank
would
you.
say if they
Thank
can
you.
have their cake and eat it too, then
Yeah.
all organizations, including ours, might actually push for that as
Sure.
well, because it was actually only very recently in our country's history that that was the case, since the 50s. But
Is that property tax you're talking about?
that's everything tax.
Churches are not taxed, Ted.
Right.
They would lose that
You know
status.
that. They would look, no.
Neither the property for the county assessor nor the income tax,
That's-
federal.
Yes,
You've got
but
these
they're,
different taxing bodies.
but they're also prohibited from taking a political position on individual candidates.
That's the federal tax.
Yes, that's what
But
it is.
does the county
Oh, I have no idea.
real estate tax on church property?
They don't, in Iowa, where I grew up, they don't have, one of the big churches there probably owned 20 acres. And we're renting it out, everything, with no taxes.
Yeah.
There's things like going to Sam's Club and using your tax-free status to not pay taxes there. There's also a Catholic bakery which doesn't pay sales tax for selling wafers to other churches. You know, there's businesses that are run completely under this tax-free status.
Well, now that bakery like that, if they sold to me, they'd have to charge tax, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
Not sure.
Yeah.
Whether
I
they're
think they
supposed
would.
to or
I
what.
don't know.
Well, if it was part of your religious practice, and
Yeah, no, it's just because I was hungry.
Certainly you can buy something else. Have your cake and wafers too.
So they don't, in a sense, they don't think they have enough freedoms
yes,
as a result of this tax break that they get.
yes, and
Probably, yeah.
And before even deciding whether we are on the side of everyone should have more free speech,
Yes.
even though they're tax-free, or, you know, everyone should be restricted, just like they decided in the 50s, they've already made their action by turning themselves into the
Yeah,
police, so there's
yeah.
nothing for us to do.
No, they're pushing the law and trying to get a retest of it.
Yeah, and there are some outcomes that could happen that we would stand by, like, you know, if everyone all of a sudden got all their rights back to, you know, as well as having their tax-free status, that'd be fine if it was equal. But there are some outcomes that could be like only churches and not nonprofits, you know?
Yeah.
And then we get into things like what is considered a religious group then, because a lot of nonprofits would be just other religions that aren't recognized.
On the edge, yeah.
Well, did the free thinkers have real estate?
No.
And do you have services separate from the Unitarians?
Yes, we do.
So you have
We call them meetings.
meeting.
That's what the Quakers.
Just
call
like
it.
we do.
This is a bunch of
So
free
you're
thinkers.
schismatic from the Unitarians.
Yes. Although we do have some events that will happen in a UU church.
Well, what's your complaint about the Unitarians?
He's sitting right here, Ted. No, I freely admit to being a Unitarian or an ex-Unitarian or whatever.
Awesome.
I'm also an agnostic, so what percentage of your organization is agnostics? Not atheists, agnostics.
I wouldn't be able to give you percentages. I haven't met everyone yet.
There isn't any such thing as a card-carrying agnostic.
I'm a secular humanist.
And I'd say a good portion of our members don't like labels
Right, exactly.
and don't come out and say it.
Right.
You know?
That's what keeps many of us away from AA, is starting out with, "Hi, I'm Joe, and boy, am I a drunk."
Sound like you've been there.
Yep, been there, done that.
I have to go over and walk the streets of Manitou Springs to see what you're doing over there.
Now, if it was a pre-thinker meeting?
Yes. Come on in, get a chair.
There's always room
We
for
have
one
extra
more.
chairs.
You can get a chair and slip in between these two guys.
Good service, we'll tell you where the chairs are.
Maybe more like the free tongue waggers than free thinkers, I don't know.
You know, I have a question.
Sure.
On this thing with the ministers about talking about endorsements and stuff, is this really something that the IRS would enforce anyway, or is this just a straw man that
Is it a
we're
red
standing up
herring?
against the government?
They sure as hell don't want to enforce
Yeah,
it.
that's
Yeah. It's one of those things where the easiest way to enforce it is to have it in place and just let fear do the enforcing. And they have not enforced it since 2008 that I know of.
Thank you.
And their lack of enforcement is troubling because the nonprofits won't risk
Yeah.
as free as a church model. You know, so basically it's just the nonprofits that are suffering. When the rule was actually put in place by Lyndon B. Johnson so that churches couldn't speak out against a particular candidate.
Or a
and it was
particular war?
Yeah. And it was a very in-the-moment move. You know, it's one of those things that we should really look at. Was that the right decision? Because he was actually doing it probably for his own political gain.
Was that just
Is that when he was running for election on his own, or?
Yeah, and for the
Never heard of
protection
that.
of his party.
So you're saying that was an executive order?
Oh, really?
No.
No.
So you said Lyndon Johnson did, but was it legislated?
Oh, it would
Not
have
sure,
to
I'll
have
have to get
been.
back to you on that, but I know it was under his administration.
But to what extent are churches liable for what their ministers say? Because ministers technically are independent contractors. They really aren't employees.
Why are we
Which is-
paying
which is
social
why-
security tax for them then?
Huh?
Why are we paying social security tax for them?
That's not very unusual if you are.
It's a good question.
Because normally my ministers have to pay the whole 15% themselves.
Yeah, it's usually by contract, the churches agree to pay part of it.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that.
It's nice if you're doing it for your minister, but legally you don't have to.
We don't have to.
Wait a minute, let's stop the meeting. We're spending money we don't have to?
There's a new item for the agenda on Sunday.
I don't know if there were any ramifications of this, but when we first moved to town, the first people we met were some old friends. I mean, older friends from childhood of my wife's family. These folks had moved from southern Illinois out to Colorado Springs, and I was looking for a job, and we stayed with these folks for 2 or 3 days while I was testing the waters out here. Ended up getting it. That's how I got my job at Mitchell High School. But shortly thereafter, the Watergate thing developed with Nixon, and I just remember the lady of this household, and they were Baptists, saying that people were in deep doggy-doo for coming down on Nixon because their pastor had said in from the pulpit, to be against Nixon is to be against God. And they accepted that. Absolutely. So I don't know what happened or what transpired with that fellow, but he was popular with his congregation apparently.
Nixon was raised Quaker.
Well, go ahead here. don't let us interrupt you.
See, when you talk about tangents, this is a group that
Yeah.
See, do I know how to describe a group or do I know how to describe a group?
just hang in there.
Yeah.
Go for it.
This election was actually just amazing to me because they did the same thing with Pulpit Freedom Sunday in 2008. And they didn't have to choose between the candidate they didn't like being a religion of them and then the candidate that they did like being Mormon. And I was just very happy to see all of these preachers from all these other denominations actually endorsing a Mormon, you know, regardless of what my own political leanings are. Here's preachers that I would normally associate with Mormon bashing, you know,
Yeah.
and to see them all having to support him to be part of this movement was awesome.
Especially
I
because
never
the Mormons
thought of
don't
it that
have a
way.
professional
Yeah.
clergy.
What's that, Will?
The Mormons don't have a professional clergy. All of them, they may have titles like bishops and stuff like that, but they're lay people. All of, even the first president of the church is a layman.
So you're saying, Will, that person could come out and endorse a particular political candidate without regard with their tax-free status?
I don't know.
Yeah.
Tried that, but
I don't know
you know,
either.
they don't pay. There are people who you know, who conduct their services and stuff like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
They don't. The Mormon Tabernacle Choir isn't paid. The director is, but so you know, those people are technically they're not professional church people.
Interesting legal question.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
All right. The mission statement of the Freethinkers of Colorado Springs, which doesn't have a national organization that they are under the umbrella of. We're not part of American Atheists or Freedom from Religion Foundation or Atheist Alliance of America. None of that. It's just an organization that only exists here in the
You're
Springs.
simply local.
Yes, simply local.
I kind of assumed that you had a kind of a national network, but
There
it's-
are groups that are part of national networks like that. We're not one of them. We haven't decided to become a chapter of anything.
In the Gazette-Telegraph a couple of weeks ago, Rebecca Hale's picture and little thing was, she was elected president of the Humanist Society of the United States or America?
Yeah, the American Humanist
American
Association.
Humanist
Becky
Society.
is now their president. She was the vice president before that, and she is one of our board members,
Right.
but we're not a chapter
But you're not
of
a
the
chapter
American
of the
Humanist Association, no. A lot of us would call ourselves humanists, but especially
I
Becky.
would too, except my friend Jerry's sitting here. And
Hi, Jerry.
And so does that mean you don't qualify?
I don't want to shock you too much.
So what was your mission statement?
He detailed.
Our mission statement is the education of the public by providing a voice that is not constrained by religious dogma or illogical claims, through, though not limited to, public discussion groups, forums, panels, and lectures. And now, B&B.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Good, all right, good. Too bad, Van.
Yeah, this is.
Now, the
this
Sir
would be
Tolman group that he Mike talked to just a couple of weeks ago, seemed to be, at one point, taking a position that you were indeed ideological just by the positions against ideological things that you were taking. Could you address that for a moment?
There are a lot of people who are very used to like looking for circular reasoning, and if we're saying as free thinkers we don't base anything on dogma, and we always want to use logic and reason and evidence, well, we just have that rule right there that we're never using dogma. So he's like, well, if you have a rule to never use dogma,
That's a
then
dogma.
that's a dogma. Well, when you look back on it, you know, we periodically look at ourselves and say, are we doing things right? We just had an entire meeting based on, do we really like our mission statement? You know, and we really love the word education in our mission statement, but things get shifted around. We're actually looking to be more proactive in the community, but just looking at the dogma portion of it, like the statement, I would rather not use dogma and I would rather use reason, logic, and science. Is that good or is that bad? Is that going to help me? I'm free to revisit that as much as I want, and those who do and decide that they want to go with reason, logic, and science and evidence, they stay free thinkers. The ones that don't, the ones that want to go back to some sort of dogmatic belief system, they're free to leave. I haven't seen anyone make that decision yet, you know, but
You have
it can happen.
Have a copy of your mission statement? Is it short?
It's short. It's right here on my.
Did you read it?
Yes, I just read it.
Okay, you just read it.
Let's succinctly.
Okay.
Part of us being a little bit more proactive about things and trying not to be seen as bigoted towards religion is doing lighthearted things like we just had the Mayan calendar survivor party.
Oh, yeah.
That's good.
So we basically advertised it as we're going to have our party the day after December 21st. We're going to have it on the 22nd, and we're going to rent out, you know, this pub, and we're going to put all this work into it because we are just going to base our predictions based on science. And,
Yeah.
you know, we don't see any asteroid coming this way. You know, we have observation, so you know, we do something fun like that just to show the methodologies that we're using. So one thing that I really wanted to let you guys know about is that here on the CC campus on the coast here at Armstrong
Hall. Yes.
Hall, that's where we're going to be having, at the end of February, we're going to have Richard Dawkins, Catherine Stewart, and Eric Cerniar speaking.
Give a little background on all those.
Okay, Richard Dawkins, he got famous by writing a book called The Selfish Gene, which that was decades ago, and he invented the word meme, and then in recent past, meme.
Meme.
Yes, like a viral thought that spreads around.
Oh.
But in recent history, he became very famous for writing a book called The God Delusion. And he's started his own foundation called the Richard Dawkins Foundation for Reason and Science. And the Out campaign is associated with him a lot. People wear these...
What is it?
These A's right here.
Yes.
This is kind of like the scarlet letter. You know, basically people wearing an A on their lapel saying, "Yes, I'm an out atheist. You can ask me about it."
Atheism. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
There's another doctor.
Catherine Stewart, I actually have her book with me. That's what the panel is actually going to be about. It's the Good News Club, and basically it's a group of school children who are being taught by churches to go recruit other school children to their church. Because there's all sorts of proselytization in schools that we can clamp down on, but we can't tell kids not to talk to other kids. And they're using that kind of a loophole to get kids to tell other kids, well, if you don't believe the way that I do, then
You're going to hell.
yeah.
Literally or figuratively.
And the difference between a bully saying, I'm going to light you on fire, or I'm going to have, God light you on fire if you don't come to my church, and on school grounds, kids are mean. They really mean.
Didn't the Baptist church kind of get in a little trouble here recently? I mean, within the last couple of years of something like that. Something like that. I don't know if it was
Really?
Well, what they did was they were baptizing
There you go.
kids who came in under another pretext, like
Getting
going
baptized without being,
they're going to a
without
camp or
permission or,
Yeah.
just.
Without their parents' permission,
Yeah.
knowledge.
But if I were principal of a school and there was a student making comments like that to other students, if you don't do such and such, I'm gonna light you on fire. As a principal, I would take action on that.
Yeah.
Because you may think you have the right to say that, that is a threat. That is a physical
But
threat.
what is the difference then when he's not saying that he's actually going to do it? He's saying that later on, your eternal soul's going to burn forever. If you don't act the way that I like you to act.
Could be that in the olden days, his behind was going to burn.
When this,
And I say that facetiously, but in all sincerity, having been a junior high school principal with 1,600 students in that school, you can't allow that kind of thing to go on and have students be intimidated, even though that person doesn't have the physical power to go out and do that. It's still it's a threat. And to me, that is wrong.
But what would happen to you if you took that position in, let's say, when you were in North Carolina? Would you have gotten support, do you think?
I would have gotten support from the superintendent of schools' office. Because we cannot be sending youthful people into a public school setting and have them be threatened. And basically, with racial issues in the past that have gone on, other kinds of things with drugs, if you don't do this or you don't do that, I'm going to do this, you get threatened and so forth. I think it was my responsibility to say, that doesn't go here. You want to go someplace else and do that, but you don't make threats like that in school and have other students intimidated and therefore have them be on edge and what that would do to them in doing their school work during the day. That to me is not acceptable, and I would fight.
Did you ever have a particular situation in which you had to act on that theory or whatever it was?
No,
That conviction.
Yeah, that's right.
no, but when, early on in the early years when I was principal there, we were under a federal court order to bus kids to school to have a racial balance
Sure.
in the schools. But as a part, and that was focused primarily on the black-white
Yes.
populations in the
Yes.
schools. But we also had a large number of Cuban students in that school whose families had come to this country to escape Castro.
Okay.
We did have to talk to some students who were threatening another student.
Well, now, were these Cubans Catholics or
I don't know
probably.
what the Cubans' religions were. I would assume that it probably might have been Catholic.
But certainly believers in God. I mean, I'm trying to sort out what it was you were dealing with.
I was dealing with physical
Threats.
intimidation.
Okay.
Yeah,
Verbal
okay.
and physical intimidation.
Yes.
Yeah, but now if you point at a kid, an 8-year-old points a finger at somebody and says bang, he gets suspended. You know, so things have really changed a lot since
Yeah.
the period you're talking about.
Somebody needs to remind them the greatest sin is playing God.
Yeah.
Plow ahead.
God doesn't like that.
I assume that the good news clubs aren't on high school, on elementary campuses anymore. But at the time, the school districts provided free time, a certain period every day or once a week, so any groups could come in and kids had the choice of going. Was that also open to groups like the free thinkers? Or did they limit it to whatever the principal's religion was, or whatever, you know?
It actually depends on the church, the school around here, because there are a lot of charter schools. One of which on the northeast side, I see the boards out for the church that uses their gymnasium as their church every Sunday, and their sandwich boards are on every exit to this neighborhood, and it's one of those things where it's a charter school and they're not funded by the state per se. So they can get away with renting out their gymnasium on a Sunday and holding a church there that has a very huge influence on the students that are going there. If it were a
Proselyting.
if it were one of the schools downtown, they would run into the problem of, well, why aren't you renting out Saturdays to those religions that would rather be there on Saturday and Friday night even? You know, the only day that they seem to have open is Sunday.
So you're saying that a regular public school would be prohibited
Yes.
from renting out their facility
And the movement,
to a religious group?
the movement towards more charter schools and vouchers is so that they can have more church influence on private schools.
So
I don't think
what
that's
law
true.
is it that does prohibit that?
Cheyenne Mountain.
Well,
High
part of
School
it
has
is
loaned
just
out
the separation of church and
Church and
state.
state.
These are state-run schools.
Right.
Yeah. Cheyenne Mountain has loaned out its auditorium to churches on occasion.
Yes,
Loaned
and-
out or probably rented out,
They rent.
because they're always broke.
And as far as whether or not an organization would lend their facilities to someone who are non-believers, Richard Dawkins and Catherine Stewart will be here the end of February on CC, and they get at least a little bit of state funding, even though they're a private school.
When charter schools get public money, it just comes through from a different, it gets there by a different route.
Yeah, that's why I said per se. It's one of those gray areas that really does need to be tested.
Let's talk about that for just a second.
Okay.
How does CC get public money?
See,
Through
Tax exempt
student loans.
status.
Well,
Well, that's not the college.
what, the college gets money through aid to students on one hand.
Well, yeah, indirectly that helps the college,
And
but
the colleges have to have equal facilities for women and men. Of course, that's a transition that took place starting 20, 30 years ago.
does CC have to pay any property tax?
No, they don't pay property. I don't think they pay property tax. I don't think any college,
Yeah.
religious college or college period,
Yeah.
pays property tax.
I don't think so either.
Okay. And I don't think they pay any income tax because most of them are just barely balancing their budgets,
Yeah.
their operating budgets.
outside of the
But
tax.
Mike
the
was saying,
biggest,
you said that there, you implied anyway, that there was public money going to private
Yeah, and,
colleges.
and
it is.
just like when you look at a NFL stadium and how much money went in to build the stadium that was from public funds, look at some of the buildings that have been given to them, or money for construction of the building has been given to each building.
But that's not state, that's not public money.
Well,
Some of it is concessions from
Oh, yeah.
the city of Colorado Springs, and you can look at in city council meetings where they're changing borders and trading land just this past year. You know, there's a lot of city investment in
That
this,
would be,
into Colorado College, but
that's still different than public money.
Well,
it is.
But
Howard,
If they're being accommodative,
it's all
that's,
mixed
Yeah.
up.
that can be criticized or not, but
it's also a tax expenditure is the latest phrase. I mean, there's a reason why a huge percentage of donations to colleges occur in the last week of the year.
Go figure.
well, that's true.
They tax
They're tax-free.
Yeah, that doesn't, that's an indirect support of the college.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you get things all mixed up, like the way the World Arena was funded. They'll pull a lot of money there. The city did a lot of things like repairing the ground, building parking lots and stuff like that. That money's used in several different places. And the primary tenant, of course, is the CC hockey team.
So I think it goes just to show that CC is a little bit better as far as a private school is, because they're allowing groups of other faiths or no faith to come and present to the college.
Is the Freethinkers tax exempt organization?
Yes, it is.
So if I donated to you in the last week of December, then indirectly you're getting funds from the government?
Yeah, it's one of those indirect ways. Huh?
Well, the funds are coming from the person who donates the money.
Well, it was just an argument you guys.
It's an indirect support.
Okay.
It's an indirect support.
I think the commonality that you see between the colleges and things like the Freethinkers Association are the fact that they're not-for-profit. So it's equally spread that any nonprofit organization can get these tax-free funds, but they have to remain apolitical.
Well, they have to remain apolitical with respect to candidates.
Yeah.
Correct.
Issues, they can speak out.
Issues, they can say
Right.
whatever they
Issues
want, just
they
like
speak out
a
loud.
church can say.
That's another issue.
But here in town, we've got several organizations like the International Bible Society, Navigators and stuff like that, the publishing houses.
Yeah.
But because the subject matter is religious, they're tax exempt.
Yeah. And there are a lot of these peripheral things, well, I say peripheral, that are questionable. But yes. Oh, we've interrupted you again. Go ahead.
Maybe get to the bottom of the page.
No, it's not going to happen. So in the past year, we've had several speakers for our monthly meetings, for our lectures to come. They'll come out. Eric Cernyar has already spoken to us about the You Deserve to Die child evangelism stuff, where they teach kids that they are inherently wrong, and that goes against most of what school teachers are taught to teach to children. Teach them that they're not inherently wrong. We have Michael Weinstein from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. He spoke to us. Yeah, the Air Force Academy guy.
Oh, really?
He's come out a few times. One was for a book tour, and one was speaking to the SSA group at UCCS. You guys know what the SSA is?
SSA?
Secular Student Alliance.
Where at?
UCCS.
Oh, okay.
UCCS, not
Yes.
Colorado College.
No, they don't have one yet.
Could have, I'm sure. If they wanted one.
We've had Richard Dawkins here speak at a high school just this past year. We've had Roy Zimmerman, who's very political. He's come and done some concerts at UU churches.
Who is he?
He's, in my estimation, he's a folk singer.
Oh, he's an entertainer.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in the vein of like 60s protest movement stuff. So we had Mark Pratarelli, as a professor from Pueblo, and he came up and talked to us about is religion bad for the planet? That's one of the things that we've talked about. Basically, things like prosperity gospel, where you're supposed to have as many children as possible, and if you do what God wants, then you're going to get more money, and basically consumerism gospel.
Yeah.
And teaching people that everything you do to the planet is okay because God provides. You know, you can spoil as much as you want and have 10 kids, and the quiverful movement, how that could be leading towards overpopulation.
I've never heard of them. Who are they?
The quiverful movement,
What is their doctrine?
have as many children and teach them about God as possible. You know the Dugars on the TLC channel, like the 16 kids?
I've heard of the TLC channel.
Yes. Well,
For
don't go there.
I've heard of television, but it's not for television.
Be fruitful and multiply.
Yes, that's the quiverful movement, is have as many kids for God as possible.
Can you generalize at all about the sort of persons that are part of your group? I mean, for example, how did you yourself, if you're willing, become involved in this? And I'm very sympathetic to what you're doing. So
I became involved in it, that camera right there.
Yeah.
I was looking for good things to film.
Yes.
So I became a part of this organization because every month they had a very interesting speaker.
Okay.
And I was an atheist before I came to this organization, and I've seen how there's differences between this organization and a purely atheist organization.
Okay.
This one is a lot more welcoming to everyone.
Okay. Now, are you married and have kids or not?
Myself, no.
No, you're not. Okay. Okay. But you have members who are?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Just interested in where you're coming from, in a sense.
Yeah, I'm towards the younger end of our group.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
Yes. Other than the children that people have.
Yes.
I'm towards the younger end of our group because groups that meet like you guys, you know, you get to a certain portion of your life where you feel generativity and you feel like giving back to the community, and there's a certain portion of your life where you want to go off to college and party.
Well said.
Okay.
Further down my outline, we've got ongoing things that we do. We do a article in the Independent. I wrote one myself just recently. I'll pass that down.
And those appear as you have money to...
They used to appear in every issue.
I know,
but now
every, and then it kind of dropped off.
It's gone down to one a month, and
Okay.
that has more to do with
Getting people
that
to
we
write
have
it?
to write.
Yeah.
Yes, because we
It's
do,
not the money issue, it's
we do
probably...
original content in the Independent.
That's what, okay.
So that article right there was something that I wrote because I, as an atheist, I was also involved in the political process this year. I was a delegate for this year's primaries. I was a voter registration drive organizer, and I also ran a polling place. And the polling place that I got assigned to run out of the...
Were you a poll watcher?
No, I was polling place coordinator.
Oh, you were
I was
the...
an election judge,
Oh, okay.
yes.
Yeah.
You saw that it all went.
So they assigned me a church. It was a Methodist church.
Sunrise or
east
Calvary?
East of Monument.
East of
You
mine.
go
Oh,
up-
Tri-Lakes?
Yeah, Tri-Lakes.
Tri-Lakes United Methodist.
And yeah, I was wondering about, you know, here I am, an atheist, about to run a poll place in a church, you know, and so I did some more research on that and found out that 45% of the polling places here in El Paso County were in churches.
Yeah.
I was in a Lutheran.
Yeah, 12% of them in Denver are in churches, and in Mesa County, out in Grand Junction, none. They have less funds than us, less public buildings, but they manage to keep it all out of churches. And that's, to me, I feel like it's probably people are more comfortable voting in a church here, and they don't see the conflict of interest at all. But
I don't see a conflict of interest.
I do.
Because this is a building.
Churches
Well,
have halls.
It's a building.
And the newer ones are very particular about complying with the American with Disabilities Act. So you can get in and out of the building. Whereas there's a lot of older buildings and stuff like that have steps and stuff like that all over the place, and that's an obstacle to people coming in to vote.
And also, schools are very not willing to open their doors to polling places anymore, especially after all of the shootings that have happened around. They have to be able to lock down their school 24/7, and when they have people walking in and out in a political fashion, it scares them. They can't protect their own schools.
Mike, are you philosophically opposed to using a church building as a polling place?
Yes, in my article, let me pass it around. I show how there's been studies done about what they call the whole place priming effect, where if you're in a church voting, you're more likely to vote more conservatively.
I would really like to discuss that for a moment. I can't imagine.
That's a fantasy.
I can't imagine.
Well, there's just conjecture that it's a fantasy, but I give citations for the studies that have been done.
Well, I'm sure there's been studies done.
And
it doesn't pass the intuition test.
Tell us if you think, Howard.
Howard.
Don't you think,
People
Howard,
have
that,
been finding priming effects all over the place.
yeah,
That is a real phenomenon, but I don't know. I think most people, first of all, most people have in their mind who they're going to vote for when they leave their house.
Yeah.
Now, there are some people on the propositions, they've never seen them before until they're in the polling place.
Yeah.
We know that. But I can't imagine any significant sway because of the physical location of the polling place.
What if it's a toss-up in their mind? And they go and they pull into the parking lot and there's this big cross. And you know, I mean, there's got to be an influence there if it's actually a toss-up on how they're going to vote.
So if it's at a non-religious institution, does that help the Democratic candidate?
I don't know.
what do you mean?
Well, I mean,
Because
the
we're
argument
not religious
is that
people.
the facility itself could have
An
influence
influence. Yeah.
on the decision made by the voter.
it also depends on the congregation itself and the denomination.
What's the
Because
emotional
it
attachment?
can favor the Democratic Party sometimes. There was actually a church this past election that voted 99% for Obama, and that is just a crazy solidarity to have everyone in the community surrounding a church 99%. You know, and they've sampled those people and found out, yes, that's the way that they voted. That wasn't, you know.
It was not a religious thing.
Well,
Just a coincidence.
a lot of them attended that church that they
Sure.
were voting at, and yes, that church was telling people to support these democratic values.
But that happened before Election Day, though. That persuasive atmosphere and that type of thing.
Well, how did Utah vote? What for Romney? What was the voting percentage there? Was it in the 80s or something like that?
I do not know if Utah.
Pretty high.
It's a huge percentage.
The
So that was a
But that,
religious
this is not because
support there,
of
too.
where people physically cast their ballot.
The biggest percentage for Romney actually came from the Oklahoma Panhandle.
Yeah.
There were places that, not having to do with the church, just places that were
Yeah.
going
Yeah, I understand.
very much just
Oklahoma's
solid for
pretty
Romney.
conservative.
It's an educational.
The Oklahoma Panhandle?
Yeah.
That's a Cimarron strip that is almost uninhabited.
Yeah.
Should be.
All 5 of the people.
But the point you're making, Mike, is that we really ought to separate church and state.
Yes,
I mean,
that's the point that
that's the
freethinkers
basic
make
point,
all
yeah.
the time,
Yeah.
yes.
Philosophically, I can agree with you, but as an election judge, I've done it in schools on Tuesday. You have kids running around, and
Yeah.
you're looking for adult bathrooms.
Yeah.
Do it in a church. There's nobody else around. First Congregational Church in Manitou Springs, where they do it every year since it was built. They have a great kitchen, you know, microwave, you can cook great meals.
It's practical. huh?
Yeah, it's very practical. And I don't think churches influence me, but I don't know.
That's a church. I attend.
Well,
Not if you're.
Yeah.
No.
What do you feel?
my solution to this, in order to get rid of any chance of the whole place priming effect, is to
Is in the
encourage
article.
people to do mail-in ballots.
Yes.
Yes.
Because then we're not really discriminating or whatnot against a religious group that might actually just want to rent their hall to different places and see no problem. If I encourage people to vote early in the mall or do a mail-in ballot, that to me is
Sure.
And
nice
So
balance.
if you were king,
voters in my last
would you eliminate all of the tax breaks for religious institutions?
personally,
A position.
I would revisit all of them.
That's a soft way of saying
Yes,
yes.
it's a soft way of saying yes.
Yeah.
Starting with, let's clear the table of all of them, and then decide which ones are benefiting our community. I have no problem with giving to a soup kitchen here. The ones that I've visited myself,
Yeah.
I think should be very supported. You know, even though they're being run by
Yeah, but
a
a soup
church
kitchen per
organization.
se is not a soup, it's not a church. It just happens that churches have started soup kitchens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if we were to do that, I'm pretty sure that a whole bunch of nonprofit organizations that ran alongside of the church would just pop up anyway. You know, and instead of giving a donation to the church, they would give to the nonprofit that runs alongside the church. And I'm sure that, you know, on a given Sunday, the pastor could divert the funds either way and say, well, this Sunday, this is what we're doing. And so I would actually have to look at what would be the benefit if all we're going to do is just, you know, put it into a different pot of funds that's doing the exact same thing. I'd have the same problem with saying that corporations can't spend as much money as they want, the whole Citizens United thing, and free speech. Well, if they can't do it themselves, they'll find some nonprofit that they can donate to that does it for them. You know, and the net effect by restricting free speech of corporations and money is basically nothing. They just, you know, they just have to hide it a little bit better.
Super PAC side.
So
Wow. Yeah.
I'd be willing to look at taking all of the tax exemptions away
Yeah.
from both churches and nonprofits, but I'd want to see what will be the net effect, you know, and how are they going to just logically get around it in that same year? Because the McCain-Feingold bill, you know, in that same year, people just got around it.
Yeah, well, that's campaign finance, I'm talking about tax breaks. Yeah.
Well, you probably don't support the idea that ministers get certain tax breaks that nobody else does too, right? About housing and things like that. So much of their money can be assigned to housing and they don't get taxed on that amount. I mean, you really got to be opposed to that.
Yeah, where it's not equitable to other groups, yes, I am opposed to it.
But that's, for clergy, that's tied in with military.
How so?
Housing is not taxed for military, and they were gonna take it away from clergy and military, and the military had such a strong lobby that it got put back in. There was a,
I don't see the link between military and clergy.
Yeah, I don't, what do you mean military?
housing is not taxed.
Housing allowance.
Clergy.
Oh,
Right? Isn't that right, Al?
And clergy, whether you get it in kind, for instance, the church provides a parsonage, or provides a housing allowance, that's not part of the salary.
Okay.
And so.
For income tax.
So that, for income tax purposes, and so,
I taught at a college once where part of my salary was providing of housing, and I didn't have to pay any tax on that.
right.
But I'll bet you got some scrutiny from the IRS. They've been
I don't
looking.
think so. I don't think I was earning enough money then. But,
Under the radar.
yeah.
I was worried over in Manitou where I go to church, because we actually pay our minister a bigger housing allowance and we pay him a salary.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He can do that because his wife works. But that's how it's set up. I was worried about that. I say if I was an IRS agent, I would pounce all over that.
Well, they did come down on that. The Clergy Housing Act of '95 or
There it
so
was, yeah.
cracked down on that because there was a minister named Deason in California who claimed a housing allowance of $200,000. Now, we know California is expensive, but that seemed a bit extreme. And so Congress cracked down by limiting the deduction to the designated amount, which is always sufficiently high.
Yeah.
Church boards aren't that dumb. Or actual cost or rental value.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're getting off the subject here. Let's get back to where you are.
Par for the course.
Yeah, okay.
Part of the course.
So, also, we're doing things like the activism. I've already said we will go down to city council. We'll do local things, but sometimes we talk about what we're going to do and decide. You know, just like the Pulpit Freedom Sunday, we were interviewed by the news about it, but as far as action, they're doing all the action.
Did you ever get your turn to pray at city council?
I've seen one secular invocation
Wonderful.
in all the times that I've been there, which is a lot. And also, the Appignani Law Center has actually sent a letter to them, like cease and desist, as far as doing the invocation at all. And in that letter, I read it, there were some things that I had to check up on myself. There was one particular invocation where Angela Dugan, one of the council members, she started like a Catholic
Yeah, with the
genuflection.
sign of the cross.
Yeah, and everything, but then she just, like, during the person's invocation was disrespectful, as though if she allowed this person to speak, she would then be cursed. Like, she was like protecting herself like that, and it's real, yeah. Like, you are from Satan, and I don't want to hear la 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 la.
So who was giving, this is when the non-religious invocation.
Yeah, that was Angela Dugan, and it's in the letter from the Appignani Law Firm. I can send it to George if you guys want to see it. And they haven't responded to that letter, and they have continued to do the invocation. And it is mostly a Christian invocation, but this is also mostly a Christian community. And you have to look at who's signing up, because anyone is allowed to go up to Amy Cox and sign up to do an invocation. You know, I've seen a Jewish one here, I've seen a Muslim one here, and I've seen a secular one here. But upwards of 90% of the time, it's completely evangelical Christian.
I've done one for the county commissioners. Sally Clark invited me to do it. And that's because I'm the former chaplain for Pike State Veterans Council. And in that capacity, I learned that I'm always talking to a very mixed audience. And I'm very careful about how I use language.
Manitou Springs used to do it 30 years ago. Excuse me for interrupting. They don't do it anymore. They haven't done it in 15 or 20
But
years.
no invocation ahead of
no praying
public
Mount
meetings.
Manitou like we used to do just before or after. We still do the Pledge of Allegiance, but
Yeah.
We have an 8 o'clock meeting, so, but it's been fun.
Yeah, the spirit of man, which is basically, tourists come and leave your money.
Did you take a position on swearing in with your hand on the Bible?
There's always the option to just affirm. That's normally in any position where you have to, swear on the Bible. Even just going to a courtroom, you can not use the Bible and just affirm with your hand up.
I've seen that.
And that option existing to
You like to have that option?
Yes.
The president, I wonder if the president has that option. I know he would never invoke it, but he wouldn't dare.
Yeah.
I suspect he has the option.
Yeah.
She's really cute too.
Well, because I don't think there's anything in the Constitution that says
No.
you gotta put your hand on Scripture.
Yeah.
I was listening to this.
Particularly because it doesn't represent all religions.
Yeah.
Somebody here.
It kind of cuts both ways, and I think at the start of the conversation, I think I was thinking, okay, so we don't want the state to be pushing a certain religion. And as I hear the conversation, I'm thinking, actually, it's probably, in practice, it's probably more the other way. Someone who's actually pretty, not very religious at his core, would probably be politically advised to be very pious in public to get the Christian vote and kind of write off any of the other denominations. And I like your opinion on which way you see it working. A really non-pious person pretending to be pious for political advantage, or whether you see there being a threat from the state trying to promote
I have
religion.
actually seen that locally very recently. There's a group that just formed called the Conservative Call to Action, and they're going to have a convention in a hotel here, and they're going to have Dinesh D'Souza, the filmmaker, and Wild Bill for America and all this stuff. But the president of Conservative Call to Action, her name is Jennifer. She basically had this horrible she made a YouTube video where she basically said that, I said that I was an atheist before, but, here are my reasons that I'm now, a Christian. And they were the worst reasons I'd ever seen. So I've seen it on a local level here, but also I would say that it is amazing that you'll have two political parties dominating American politics, and on both sides you have to have a politician with God on their resume. As if, like, all of these positions, God has taken both positions on every different part of their platform. He's hedging his bets on everything,
God gets blamed for a lot of things.
It's not like sports where, maybe there's this zone where God stays out of it because there's people on both sides, both teams praying. This is like abortion or no abortion, death sentence or no death sentence. These are things that you.
These are live issues before us right now.
There would be a clear-cut, position that the God would take, but you can see many races where the Democrat and the Republican, completely diametrically opposed politically, are having the same God on their resume. And that is very unique to American politics.
That's not the same God.
You gotta go.
I mean, Richard Nixon's God.
Come back.
Thanks for
Come
coming
back.
up.
Sorry, I gotta go take my daughter to school, so.
Education is important.
Now, there are.
Is it a
states
charter
that still
school?
have-
Good to have you with us.
What kind of personality does the principal have?
He was just saying that there are still, and I know it's 7 states, one of them's Texas, that have in their state constitutions that you must believe in a higher power in order to hold state office. And
Is that in the?
that's in their
What's in
constitution.
the
It's been
Constitution?
challenged in a few times, and it's been overturned. And no, but it's one of those rules like adultery. that nobody takes that law seriously anymore,
Mhm.
but it's still there, written in their constitution, and it hasn't been amended yet.
How did you find your way to this organization?
The camera.
Okay.
But as far as finding them and all,
Yes,
and
that's
finding
right.
out, I'm online a lot, and there's a website called meetup.com
Mhm.
where they have all of their events listed. Also, you can find the ads in the newspaper, and you can find them on Facebook. I'm now the one who's posting everything on Meetup and Facebook.
But I don't know
They have
anything
a
about, I don't know
newsletter.
anything about your background. Were your parents atheists or non-believers?
No, my mother is an Assembly of God
Okay.
Christian, and my father was confirmed Catholic, but he's, we call him an apatheist, that kind of person.
Yeah.
An NPC?
The,
Is that like
the
an
I don't
NPC?
care about it at all theist.
Sure.
Bring it up at the dinner table when he says, let's change the subject.
Yeah, okay. Well, but in that respect, you didn't change the subject. You, it's unusual. I mean,
It's becoming more usual with younger generations,
Mhm.
but for me, it was just following a methodology of what do I think is true and not, and not making a special exemption, special pleading, not allowing for something to be in a special zone of okay, I'm going to treat this one way and then treat everything else the other. And I went to a whole bunch of Bible studies as a teenager, and I would come across literal interpretations, and then hearing things, okay, well, that book is just completely hippie Jew poetry, and you're not supposed to take that literally, and to me, if you're not going to take part of it literally, to me, you can look at each part of the Bible and decide whether it was literal or figurative, and look at what they actually meant. But to me, the extreme of the literal, it would be standing against teaching evolution in schools.
I'm sure. Oh yeah.
It would be the Westboro Baptist Church many times are, to me, seem like the most literal interpretation of what's in the Bible. And so I'm not for that. But then, if I'm not for that, then I can pretty much revisit every part of the Bible and decide, is that good for me or not?
Yeah.
And logically
Yeah.
following your thinking.
So if mankind had never come up with this notion of God and religion, would we have had, throughout history, fewer wars?
Mankind has had just this awesome propensity to use war for all sorts of things. And I get it thrown in my face a lot as an atheist that there are many figures throughout history that were atheists that committed atrocities. So I would have to just concede right away, no, removing religion would not have an effect of everyone's just going to be peaceful. We'd still have to...
Right. But notice I used in my question the word fewer.
Fewer.
Yeah.
It's relative, though. It's subjective. Calls for a conclusion on the witness. How'd that go?
Well, right now, if you look across the world landscape, a lot of the wars that are going on have religious implications.
Yeah, and
Not necessarily
the question
Christian, but
is, if you
religious.
take Islamic terrorists,
Yes, right.
would they still be terrorists if there wasn't such a thing as Islam?
Yeah.
Would they be
Who
doing it for
knows?
reasons of power and other kinds of things?
Yes.
Yeah.
The only thing I think I can be certain of is that there would be less wars with religion as the reason.
Yeah.
At least the pretense.
Yeah, as the pretense. Yeah. So
It's propaganda.
I would hope. One of
Pretend you're
the-
biased.
The question I might ask is, would there be so many unresolvable positions that would cause war to happen? I think many times ideologically, there's just no way to resolve something like, hey, that is the mount where my temple used to be, and God promised me that.
Yeah.
And there's no way that I can change dogmatically. You know, God told my people 1,000 years ago that's mine. So we're just not going to resolve it.
Yeah.
And when two different religions have the same view, that's the clash.
And there's the clash that just becomes unresolvable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you get to the point where it's no longer about logic, that we can carve up the real estate, and actually that place has terrible water pressure, let's go down in the valley.
Well, you can expand that from war to social justice issues.
Yes.
You know, abortion, gun control, I mean, all these different things, it's the same type of thing. It says in the right here. That's why there should be no gay marriage, it says right here. And of course, over here it says differently, but the verses we're using says,
In the Bible.
yeah.
I think in the future, if we see a place that used to have a lot of religion and then switches to not having a lot of it, there's still the challenge of teaching ethics.
What would be an example of that?
I've seen a banner from humanists all around the world. They'll put up a billboard that says, "You can be good without God," right? And they've found themselves reasons to do charitable things and be nice to people. And when you leave a religion, as I have, you do revisit, well, why am I a moral person? You know, why is it that I would want to do good things? And it's a lot briefer of a moment in my experience than a lot of people would be afraid of. You know, they think that if there is no religion, if people just all of a sudden stop believing in God, then it's going to be chaos. You know, everyone's going to be shooting each other, and for the most part, people being social, you know, it's a social contract. You know, you don't want people to kill you, you don't kill them. You know, and I think a lot of that is actually written into the Bible, like in the Golden Rule. You know, where there's a lot of stuff that we still need to take from the Bible and a lot of other texts, and realize that there's good there, and keep it with us, even if we don't keep a part of it with us.
Mike, I have a question. I looked at your website last week when they announced you were going to be here.
Oh, which one? The Freethinkers website?
Freethinkers. And there was something about science, and that your ideals are based on science. And I wish I'd written it down now, but there was something on the front page of it about most of your things are based on scientific.
Are you implying that science is the God?
Well, not really.
No.
But, how much of that gets into your overall ideals?
There's many different methodologies people can use to find out what's true. Okay, and we think about epistemology a lot, even those of us who don't even know what epistemology is. But as far as being a skeptic, being a skeptic is the antithesis to having faith. And when I say faith, I don't mean confidence in something. I don't mean magically God gave you the eyes to be able to read in between the lines in the Bible and understand it better than somebody who's an atheist, because I've gotten that from people. When I say faith, I mean like blind follow. If you're a skeptic, trusting. If you're a skeptic, you're going to investigate. If you have faith, you just know it's true. You know. Much the same way, dogma is the antithesis of free thought. So there's many different methodologies that people will employ as being the best one that brings us the most truth. there's logic, reason, mathematics, empiricism, which would be what the scientific method is built on. All of these things together bring us a lot of information. Most skeptics would look at any part of any pillars that are holding up a belief that we have, and if that pillar is faith, they're going to try their hardest to use the other pillars to crowd it out. You know, they're looking to remove as much faith from what we know as possible and find good explanations for it.
Good meaning what?
Most of the time, validatable, testable.
Okay.
Things that we have a reason other than
Empiricism.
Empiricism.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you can use the other methods as well, just logic itself. You can empirically test whether a number exists. But there is a point where some of that is not going to work. So when I say they're trying to crowd out faith and explain away as much of the world that can be explained, I've come across some of those things in my reading that you just can't use some of those methodologies to get around. One of them would be Descartes' cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah.
Everything is hinging on that. If you were just a brain in a vat, you know, and all of this is just a simulation, you wouldn't know, and there's no way to test whether this is reality. So you can get to this point where you just cannot use those methodologies to go any further. But I'd say I like empiricism a lot because it brings the goods. And I like my cell phone, you know, and anyone who's going to...
Even though it's frustrating.
Yeah. Anyone who's going to attack empiricism and, you know, preach that faith is the only way, I just want them to turn in their cell phones and see if they like life after that, you know. Faith healers, I want them to never get to that point where they need medicine, you know. I feel like there's a lot of hypocrisy that when we look at ourselves and try to use the same methodology for everything, we can eliminate a lot of our own hypocrisy. But it's important to come and share ideas with other people, because sometimes you're not the best person to see what's wrong with yourself. You know?
I have a kind of a practical question. Have you worked in tandem with ALCU and have you brought any cases in that have been won in your position?
He means ACLU.
The ACLU, yes. And no, we've gone through the Appignani Law Center, which is a part of the American Humanist Association, in order to address the invocation problems. But I do know Lloyd Warble from the ACLU here, and if I had a problem, I'd know to talk to him first to see if they needed to get involved, because sometimes they just know the next step that you need to take, and that's the best resource that they have is not their lawyers, but the people who volunteer for them that just have a lot of information.
I know that it came up briefly at least, whether or not the Free Thinkers as an organization takes specific positions on pieces of legislation or referendi. But could you address that a little bit? Because that came up with Sir Tomans, that are you out there supporting or arguing against?
Another thing that we didn't have a chance to take a position on because it failed on its own was what we call the Perennial Personhood Amendment. It comes up every year in different forms, and it was just introduced into legislation again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but
what does that mean?
The Personhood Amendment is basically outlawing abortion by declaring fetuses from conception a real person.
Mm-hmm.
Deserving of citizenship rights and all that.
Yeah.
all that are pertaining thereto.
Yes. So, they had backed by Focus on the Family, they had signature getters out there getting signatures for stuff, and they just weren't as organized as people who wanted to legalize pot. You know? So Amendment 64 gets passed, and Amendment 65 and Amendment S were both on the ballot. And Amendment 65 should have been the place of the personhood amendment. They just didn't get enough signatures. And it went into this 30-day grace period where they had a makeup period, and they just realized that they just were not going to make it. No matter how much money they pumped into it, they just didn't have enough people getting the signatures. They didn't have people willing to sign it. I mean, we've heard this year after year after year. So now, instead of using the citizens initiative, they're going to go for the legislature, and that's why they've just introduced it in state Congress. Again,
Any legislature can introduce any bill.
yes.
It goes to committee, and then it'll either come out of committee or it won't.
Yeah.
So I don't think in this legislature.
And one of the things
they
that stalls it in committee now is they've tried so many different ways to pass it. How can they get the wording just right? You know, and depending on how it comes out, when it actually does get on a ballot, we will oppose it. And mostly for the reasons that it's dogmatically influenced, but yeah, some of that influence you would only see if you followed one of the congressmen to the church that he goes to right after introducing something like that, and then gets high fives from the preacher, and then becomes part of the service right then and there.
But you wouldn't oppose something just because evangelicals, as an example, supported it.
If the reason it was introduced was the dogma.
But you would look at it. I'll give you credit. I think you would look at it on its own basis, on whether it's good or not, independent of who's pushing it.
Yes, and that goes with everything, because like I said, Democrats and Republicans, most of them have God on their resume. You know, and most of them can say this is a good thing, and God likes good things, right? So we really do look at whether it was bad, and then whether it was based on some dogma that you know, we want to revisit and actually have that be part of the reason why we're revisiting it.
Yeah. Well, personhood has a whole lot of practical legal issues, independent of the thrust, the reason why people put it up, which is the abortion issue.
Antonin Scalia, is that his first name?
Antonin.
I think pretty much regarded pretty much as maybe the most conservative a member of the Supreme Court, and Catholic, I believe. But I remember it struck me an interview that I listened to and saw on TV a few years ago, and he was asked specifically, I don't remember the interviewer, how he interpreted the question of who was protected by the Constitution in terms of life, liberty, and personhood was the agenda. Who were the founding fathers thinking in terms of sperm or something other than a baby in the literal sense? And Scalia's response to that struck me. He said, well, it's clear to me they were talking about people who were walking around. And I said, whoa, if there was anybody in the Supreme Court who might support the personhood kinds of thing, I would have thought it would have been Scalia.
I don't know, he's a strict constructionist.
Yeah. And so is he parsing constitutional verbiage to not apply. If you're going to be a strict constructionist, you can't bring the personhood issue into the abortion issue.
I'm not surprised to hear you.
Really? You're not surprised that he would take that position?
Because, I mean,
how would he then vote, however,
well,
on abortion, for example?
I can't say, but he abhors people using the Constitution to gain what they want that really should be decided in the political arena.
Well,
that's the way I look at it.
Was the free thinkers, if that became an issue, would your position be that this is really a political rather than a moral or a constitutional issue?
Not exactly sure where you're getting at there.
Oh. If there were a specific piece of legislation, would you actively, would your organization actively oppose or promote?
I would say based on the history of our organization, after most of the bill is hashed out and nothing says something like we're going to protect babies because God says so. On its face, it'll look like a completely stripped of God piece of legislation, but there are still feelings that something might be, the support behind something might be due to people's dogmatic beliefs that that's the way it should be. You know, even though they can word it completely devoid of any reference to God. And so I think when leaving dogmatic faith behind, a lot of free thinkers do tend to lean either more libertarian or more liberal than a lot of dogmatic churched people who would lean more conservative. And I still think that they would probably oppose any sort of personhood amendment based on the history of the organization.
What would the group's position be on the death penalty? I mean, arguably, you could trace it back to a religious type of thing, but currently the laws are very specific and they have standard after standard after standard that have to be met.
I'd say most of the members would be in opposition to the death penalty, and in fact, one of the speakers we had in this past year was Reverend Roger Butts, and he spoke about Coloradans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, which is a group that he's a part of.
He leads that group now, I believe.
Yeah.
No, it's led out of Denver. He leads it locally. There's a woman in Denver that's actually runs the group. I'm a part of that group.
He's a Unitarian, ex-Unitarian minister at High Plains.
He was.
He was. He resigned.
I remember him being there. You know.
Oh, do you?
I do.
Is your occupation a photographer? Is that what you do?
No, when I set my camera up like that, I'm a YouTuber, and I just put up some of the stranger things that I do.
Great, and you've got my big bald head right here.
Well, what's a YouTuber? I'm not a Luddite.
Okay, there's a website called YouTube where it's a video sharing service where a lot of us will upload videos and we can subscribe to other people almost as though we have our own television show. Don't worry about your head. This morning I had 1,969 subscribers, so that's as far as it's going to go.
Well, you probably get me. I don't know if you picked up on it. I'm also a fellow atheist, and I found you on the web last night. That's how I knew to come here today.
And that's why a lot of us find each other our meetings.
Mm-hmm. I was very interested about the death penalty question. I think one of the arguments that comes up regarding the death penalty is how far down the scale of the seriousness of crimes that you can go with the death penalty. Because if somebody knows that they're going to face the death penalty for a certain crime, it gives them the incentive to kill whoever might be a witness to it. So, I mean, let's just go way off the deep end. Let's say that for jaywalking even, I could get the death penalty. If I jaywalked, anybody that saw me, I would now have a want to kill them so that I don't get the death penalty. So now when we bring it up higher, it's not just my rights, it's, you know, what's good for society also. Is imposing this type of a stringent penalty for whatever crime going to further crime.
The furthest down the scale of what is acceptable to execute someone for, besides treason, which is, you know, where do you put that on the scale? I've seen in Louisiana, it's the only state where if somebody rapes a child, they can be put to death for it. So then a child rapist, if they kidnapped a child and raped them, then they would have a very big incentive to kill the witness, you know, rather than face death if that witness were to testify against them.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's all kinds of cases where a perpetrator will harm or kill witnesses regardless of whether or not the offense is a death penalty case potentially.
But the death penalty isn't based upon the original offense, it's on the offense of murder.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what the original crime is.
No, but the point I'm making is that people who perpetrators will try to keep from getting caught, regardless of the crime they're committing oftentimes. I mean, the paper today is the story about this young couple that was murdered in their home by a burglar. Mm-hmm. Burglary is not a capital crime. But obviously this kid didn't want to get caught. So he shot the people who could identify him.
He was 17. He is 17.
Yeah. Well, my position is that I don't think it's a moral question. I think it's a financial question. It costs more than it's worth. That's what I'm thinking about it. Yeah. I mean, we can argue and then two people can commit identical crimes. One takes the death penalty, one doesn't. So somebody makes a decision along there. So the practical way out is let's just save the money and just end the whole thing. I mean, that's my position on it.
The other thing you could do is as soon as you found them guilty, march them out and kill them.
Yeah.
And that takes away the cost.
Yeah. And it worked during the French Revolution.
You want to reinstitute the guillotine too?
How do you feel about guillotines and a tax on the guillotine?
We're about out of time.
I think the tax would be one.
Okay. It's good as long as you've got a position here.
Yeah, Howard, one last comment.
No, I was just going to thank Mike for coming. Glad to have
Thank you.
new people stop by. And
yeah.
Do we have anybody lined up?
No, we don't. For next week, we need a volunteer for topic and food.
Mike, one final question. Who are the Milwaukee Panthers?
University of Wisconsin.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
They don't have a football team.
Good for them.
So that's why their mascot isn't very well known. But the Panthers basketball team gets into the Final Four sometimes. So yeah, this is my alma mater. So,
You're from Wisconsin?
I spent quite a long time there.
Gee, so did I.
Actually, as a father of a young man my son, who attended the University of California in Santa Cruz, I can beat that. Their mascot is the banana slug. and their athletic cheer is Slam 'em slugs. Mike, thank you very much for coming. I think this is the easiest way to have the agenda, I'll tell you. Find somebody articulate to come in and do all the work for you. So. And you made a statement about my cooking also. You didn't need anything.
Two volunteers.
I need a ride.
Okay, I'll get it. I could.
Okay.
It's
Your
right
own
on the way.
personal life, how did you,
Somebody down here.
how did you
Or Alan,
get to
or-
the point
I
of,
think you've got
or
three
did you
now
get to the
fighting
point of
over here.
rejecting
Okay.
religion?
No, I'm
I
good.
mean, you're
Yeah.
It's
obviously.
right on the way.
Well,
Uh,
my answer
Well, I
to
feel
that is
pretty
Think
not
you're gonna take an
confident.
email this week?
the way most adults come
It would
into
seem
it.
so.
Mhm.
Because I made the decision
Get
at
one more
7.
shot, somebody else.
7.
At-
7 years old. I made
Oh,
the
really?
decision. And I did not have good reasons then,
No,
because I was a 7-year-old.
yes.
I would say the way that I came to it was, I was in the Assembly of God Church, and they had this program called Vacation Bible School. And for an entire week, we were trying to do things to earn the currency of the store that they had through their Vacation Bible School. There was a program called Cowboy Bob, and he was a Christian cowboy. And we were watching tapes of Cowboy Bob, and then the youth directors had to put on plays that was part of the program when you buy this entire kit for your church, right? So part of this program is there's incentives that are called cowboy bucks, and you get as many as you can collect for whatever good things you do. And then you take them to the general store, which is just a room in the church that was set up to give candy and stuff. But this program lasts beyond the Vacation Bible School. So the Vacation Bible School basically introduces the cowboy bucks, but then they can use them as like treats instead of giving you the candy right away. Each Sunday school teacher will have a stack of them that she'll hand out for certain things. Like if you brought your Bible to Sunday school, you get 1 cowboy buck every week just for having your Bible there. Bringing a friend would get you 5. Knowing the verse of the week, stuff like that. Well, the way that I came to not believing in God was in that particular denomination, we didn't just believe that you were punished in the afterlife. Bad things happen to you right away when you start sinning. It's like this magical sticky substance that will stick to you and make bad things happen to you throughout the day. So I saw an opportunity when one of the Bible school teachers had left her entire envelope full of cowboy bucks.
Oh.
And I snatched that entire envelope. And see, I was trying to save up cowboy bucks to get something from the general store. It was a raft with oars and everything. And this was in California. We lived next to the beach. I wanted that raft, you know. But after taking it, I realized that I could not buy that raft right away because there weren't enough Bible bucks in circulation in the church.
You're smarter than most criminals.
Started printing your own money.
So even at that age, I knew I had to sit on this envelope for about 6 months maybe before I could go in there and try to turn in a whole bunch of cowboy bucks and try to buy that thing, because nobody had enough cowboy bucks to buy that thing. It had like 1,000 cowboy buck price. And even at 7, I could realize, you know, I had to sit on this thing. Well, in sitting on it and having this envelope at home, I was like, okay, I haven't been struck by lightning. Nobody's accusing me of anything. Some of the people in my church actually believed that they had the ability to see whether or not you were lying. They called that one of the gifts that they would get. And they had no clue.
Yeah.
You know, they had no idea whatsoever that I was the one who took the envelope. And seeing these people pretend like they had magical powers and they could see who was evil and who was not, and knowing that I done did it.
And nobody saw you. Okay.
That was how I originally came to not believe in God in that church.
Did you get your raft?
Confession is good for the soul, I guess.
This is the first time you told anybody about this, right?
No, this isn't the first time I've
Did you
told
get your raft?
I eventually did get the raft. And
How many envelopes
I
did
didn't
you have to
drown in
steal?
the raft, of course. The raft didn't pop when I got it. Everything worked out great for me. And that's how I came to that conclusion. And throughout my teenage years, the reason why I went to churches or Bible study at all was because my friends were going.
Yes, yes.
And it was a socializing place.
Sure.
And it was also a thing that I could tell my parents, hey, I'm going to church. And they wouldn't, if I asked them, hey, can I go to the movie theater? They might think twice. But if I said, can I go to church with my friends? They're like, oh, go. You're a bad kid. You need more of that. You know?
Did you buy your first car with cowboy bucks too?
No. Cowboy bucks. But,
Oh, this has been.
I went to quite a few different denominations with different friends.
Yes.
Just being a pain to a lot of Sunday school instructors and asking a whole bunch of questions that they got angry at me for asking. And it never took for me.
Thank you.
You know, every different church I would go to, and sometimes the answers to questions that I would ask were so incredibly stupid.
Yes.
You know, and just going to some of these churches and seeing them completely say things like evolution. You know,
evolution.
that they're teaching science in school in order to undermine the church.
Yeah.
You know, and in order to give the devil a way to put his foot in the doorway. When I heard things like that, I'm like, you know, it just doesn't make any sense to me. You know.
Well, thanks for coming. This has been fun. It's been really fun.
I will tell you though that as far as becoming an out atheist and declaring it openly, didn't happen until after I'd spent 6 years in the Army and went on to a career in a different company where I finally started to get fed up with it. And I experienced a lot of having people push their religion on me.
Yes.
And I just got to this tipping point, and also an educational point where I was better able to deal with that. I didn't go to college before I was out of the Army as well.
Yeah. Have you found yourself discriminated against in society in any ways when they...
I've lost jobs.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because of this?
Yes,
Yeah.
because of this. Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, well, if I got laid off out of order in my union, and the reason why, you know, people will tell me, you know, on my way out, man, I'm sorry, you know, that, you know, they feel that way, that they're discriminating against you. I'm like, okay, I didn't bow my head when everybody else was praying at lunchtime. How did they know? Unless they didn't bow their head too, and they were looking around. You know, I don't normally push it around my workplace.
Yeah.
I don't flaunt my outside of work beliefs around my workplace, especially because I run into things like being paired up with someone to work. As an electrician,
Yeah.
you work in pairs.
Sure.
You know, for safety in case one of you gets zapped. I'll be paired up with someone who thinks that Barack Obama is a Muslim.
Yeah.
Or a secret Muslim.
Oh, wait a minute now. Just kidding, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And yeah, when that happens, I'm like, there's no point in me trying to debate with this person or letting them know how I really feel. I'm going to go through my workday and try to get through it. And many times, I just can't anticipate what it is that is the tell that lets people know that I'm not on the same page as them. You know, it'll be some sort of test of faith. Then they'll start getting inquisitive, like, well, what church do you go to? There's a loaded question, because the answer is I don't often go to church. And when I do, just saying that it's a UU church, then they're like, oh, you must believe in space aliens. You know, you're from the devil, because the UU church is from the devil, just like the Mormon church is from the devil. I work with a lot of people.
Did you find discrimination when you were in the Army?
Yes, a few times. In fact, once I was driving a Humvee from Fort Lewis, Washington, near Tacoma, all the way to Twilly Army Depot, south of Salt Lake City. And the sergeant that I was with would drive, and he would give me his inspirational books and have me read them out loud. Because he knew that I was not going to a church. He wanted me to go to his church. So he would have me read these inspirational books. One of them I actually, when I got out of the Army, I bought it because it had, I'm one of those people that if I read a book or buy a school book, I like to have it in my bookshelf because I might remember something for, something else and want it as a reference. I bought that book. It's by Hal Lindsey, The Final Battle. And it's basically a book about Armageddon. But I remember reading that book for hours until I lost my voice. Because when somebody is in an immediate position over you, that's your squad leader, you do what they say. Other than that, I would say it was light things like having to sit through long-winded invocations while I'm standing at attention. I never liked that. But I'm sure I wasn't the only one. I'm sure there were religious people that didn't like that either.
Well, it's interesting. I only ask because in Memorial Park, there's the military memorials in one area, and one of them is the Special Forces Memorial, and there is actually a Special Forces prayer where they're talking about doing the good for God. They were doing this as God's soldiers. And I think the people that take the most liberty in taking lives have this great prayer, I mean, the ones that have the authority to do this, and it's just so weird.
Makes you want to just start selling wristbands that say, "Who would Jesus kill?"
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So Jesus action figure that had an AK-47. It was awesome. It was Warriors for Jesus.
How many clips does God want you to have?
Well, Mike, it was nice to meet you.
What college would Jesus target?
They jumped in too.
Yeah.
Not the one I go to.
Just Rob Kitchen.
Yours.
All right. Well, this was actually very I enjoyed the Q&A.
You didn't have any guilt feelings about talking to this group in the church, did you?
I get less and less each time. This time last year, there was at the New Church of Pueblo, they were celebrating Darwin's
And out of that population, and all the professors have to sign
they made a
this
cake
pledge that they're
for
Christians.
Charles Darwin.
To be
Like,
hired by
in a
this
church?
university.
That's
I've got to go
awesome.
film that.
And I
Yeah.
would say that the
So,
population
yeah.
of the students that go to religious
Less and
services are
less.
the same that go to religious
And you're,
services at
and
UCCS.
you earn a living by being like an electrician, is that right?
It's just a sham,
Yeah.
the whole thing. It's just
Well,
so
thanks
weird.
very much for coming.
thank you.
Very
good.
Setting things
Yeah.
up that are religious.
Is there anything I can do to help clean up?
We got the table cleaned off here, and so.
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Thank you.
I got to come back.
So you didn't get to try the sausage potato mix thingy.
You know, I didn't know that there was going to be food here. I had made pancakes before I got here. I had stacked like that high, and I'm stuffed up to here, and the coffee just filled it.
Mine, early 70s, he and his wife
How often are
joined
the
the
first brothers meeting?
First Presbyterian Church.
Depends on which
downtown
type of meeting
Big
you're talking about. The socials are once a month. The lecture
And
meeting
Don
is once a month.
and Irene were
And we're
pretty
planning more and more things throughout the weeks.
And they
The next
chose
one that I
that
know of is the one I set up, which is just Tuesday night coffee.
The agenda of the
225 on
who's still
Weber.
at that church. I don't know if he's
Is it on the
officially
meetup?
the head.
It's on the meetup. Also, there's other groups in town that our membership kind of
But
overlaps.
over the
Yeah.
years,
So like I got all
that
like
church
skeptic stuff.
evolved
I know there's
into
something
one of
going
the
on
more
at like
fundamental
6 o'clock or 7 o'clock tonight.
churches in
They were both on the same day.
Oh yeah, there's a
hell.
I know.
Can something like
Amendment
that
64
Oh yeah, about
type
the.
thing.
And you got,
Yeah.
well,
Somebody had mentioned.
during at least the transition
somebody put
period,
a
the same
reply on
man.
there. No thanks, I'm not going to this because it's back by the Koch brothers or something, and I had no idea what they were talking about. So.
Pressure here, the kind of.
This is my new friend Rob.
Hello.
Everybody.
Good to meet you.
Rob.
But it's no longer